I had decided that I didn't want to be alive anymore. Not because I didn't want to be alive, but because I didn't want to deal with the emotional pain of it all anymore. About that time, as I'm thinking all this, all of a sudden, God took me from my body and took me out into the heavens. I was alive, I wasn't asleep, and at that moment, my consciousness expanded.
Hello and welcome to God's Voice today. I'm your host, Vladimir Proknevsky. On God's Voice Daily, Kaylee joined me and shared a small part of her story, how God took her out of her body in spirit form and brought her to a place between heaven and earth, where she saw the universe being shaped by Him. Kelly is on the line with me today again, and we're going to go deeper. Kelly, before we talk about what God showed you there, let's back it up for everyone watching. What was happening in your life leading up to that moment? What brought you into that place of despair before this encounter happened?
Okay, so I'm in my, I'll say 60-ish now, and this was when I was like 17 to 20. But before that, when I was a child, I had a turbulent childhood. My parents were, uh, they got divorced when I was like 7. My brother had some problems emotionally, so we went from being a very stable family to being an unstable family and going through a lot of hardships and poverty and things like that. So my brother in particular, he had like ADHD and dyslexia, so he couldn't even read until he was like 3 years old, and I mean, in third grade, so it really affected him. He was bullied and all that, which made him turn into a bully. And so, between all the things that were going on with the family life, and particularly with him, he just couldn't deal with things. And even as he was growing up, he was acting out and doing drugs and having people over to the house. So it was just very turbulent. My mom has always been a Christian, so we went to church. We were Baptist, and I went to church with her until I was about 12. And my brother stopped going, but I would say that all the emotional turbulence and everything of my childhood and trying to deal with everything that was going on with my brother, um, it kinda left me, I would say, with no confidence and feeling like I didn't have any self-love for myself. I didn't think that I was smart or pretty or valuable or that sort of thing. So, having to deal with that, and I did. My mom, she was a wonderful mom. I knew she loved me and everything. My dad, not so much. He would do things that were abusive, not physically abusive, but emotionally. Even though he wasn't there, he wouldn't pay the child support or the money to my mom. So my poor mom's working 2 jobs as I was a kid. We were latchkey children basically. But it hit my brother a lot harder than it hit me. But I did have some self-worth issues. And as I got into my teens and stuff, um, particularly as I got into college and I got into really my first relationship with my boyfriend, and I was working so much. A, uh, I was working as a server at a restaurant, working full time and trying to go to school full time. So I took on too much, and it's part of my personality type where I will just take on everything and I don't think about that I'm doing too much or how it's affecting me, and maybe until it gets too much. And that's exactly what was going on. I could have corrected some of these behaviors on my end, as far as maybe I didn't have to go to school full time. Maybe I didn't have to, work full time. I could have changed some things, but my own thinking, I think probably, and I could have definitely ended that relationship with my first boyfriend as he started doing things that were not physically abusive, but really emotionally abusive and cheating and all sorts of things like that. But I couldn't see that. I think because I got kind of in a hold with the emotional depression and stuff. I couldn't see that. I couldn't see my worth. I couldn't see my value. And so, as I got into that place, I didn't know how to get out of it. I couldn't see how to get out of it. I just thought, I've got to go through years of this with my schooling. I'm not finished yet. And I just got there. So it wasn't a happy time, but I will say that this whole experience showed me that you can think differently, you can change yourself. I should have maybe gotten some help. I should have told someone, but I didn't. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. I guess another thing we can kind of start when I was a child. When I was about 2.5, when I was 2, I had a medical event where I had a very high fever and I had to be left at the hospital overnight because my mom had to go home and take care of my brother. My dad was out of town. And I almost died, but I didn't. And I don't really remember that. I remember waking up in the hospital afterwards. But shortly thereafter, when I was about 2.5, I started having seizures. And so I had these seizures, most of them between when I was 2.5 and 5. And so what would happen is when I'd have these seizures, I was told, I should lay down so I wouldn't hit my head if I could feel them coming on. Sometimes they just came on, I didn't. Most of the times I could kind of feel them coming on, I'd lay down on something on the floor or something. And so when I first started having them, I I all of a sudden found myself in a different place. It was like a meadow. I think it was heaven. It was a meadow, and there were all these flowers and plants, and they just glowed with life and light from within. So I was sitting there, and I'm looking around at all the plants and the flowers and stuff, and I see a man, and he's on the other side near the woods, and he comes through the meadow walking slowly and calmly, and he says, and I'm gonna read it exactly because I think it's fairly interesting. He said, "I have been sent to stay with you while you are here, and you are safe, and you're going to be okay." Okay, and he was dressed in, like, 1850s to 1900 type clothes, and I was a little kid, so I just accepted it, and I accepted him, and I knew I wasn't in my body, but I didn't know where I was. But he did make me feel safe and comforted, and so, basically, every time I had a seizure, I would see him. Now, why I say this is because remember I told you how I believed in Jesus, I was baptized. When I say I'm baptized, because I don't want people to think that the baptism is what saves you. I believed in Jesus, that he came to earth, lived on earth, died, and was resurrected for us. So that's my shorthand because I was a Baptist. That means that I believe in the Holy Spirit and God and Jesus. And so I think because I had all those experiences when I was a kid, because I had seizures up until I was about 12. They tapered off and they said they will go away as you come out of childhood. But they were quite serious. They told my parents I could die. And so whenever I had them, it was very upsetting for my parents that I had them, but it wasn't upsetting for me because I would go see my friend Charlie, who was always there waiting for me. Now, we didn't have like these great talks or anything, but I knew he was either an angel or an ancestor angel or something. I didn't know what. I didn't ask him. I was a little kid, right? So I just accepted him with the faith of a little kid that he was there. He never harmed me. He never asked me deep questions. He'd be like, "Hi, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine. How are you? I haven't seen you for a while," kind of thing. And then we played games, like, he taught me, how to play basketball, how to dribble a basketball. We played baseball and stuff like that, and played jack. Sometimes we just sat around in the field and picked flowers and stuff. So because I think I had those kinda spiritual events that happened that I just assumed everybody had. I didn't and then I learned as I was growing up, nobody had them. So I didn't ever mention them to anyone because I've learned that people didn't have them. So, um, because I kinda believed in those things, I think that is a basis for some of this. And I guess the other way I'm gonna set this up and you can ask questions at any time if you want.
Oh, no, Kelly, I'll wait till the very end. I want you to tell the whole story. I don't want to interrupt you at all.
Okay, and then I think the other big thing that, I did have some of these spiritual experiences, uh, even other times during my life, so I kind of have accepted certain things that go on and I know that and sometimes I just would ignore them. I'd be like, "Okay," and keep moving on. So then I'll set this up in another way. one day, and this was early October of this year, and I had been listening to your podcast. I listen to a lot of things. I take care of my mom. She's, in her 90s, so she
Wow.
needs help and she lives here with me. And I took her to get her hair washed. And, so then I say I've got a half an hour or so. I'll go get some steps in. And so I put these podcasts on, your podcast, actually. I listened to it and I was just about finished and I finished it up. I've got my phone and I'm scrolling. I've had my headphones on, usually have like one in and one out so that I can keep a look. So I'm walking down this strip mall sidewalk, and strip mall sidewalks are 6 or 8 feet wide, and there are people around coming in and out of. There was, a shopping center, a store, like a grocery store, and all these other little stores, and people are going in and out. And so I'm just walking down the sidewalk because I'm just going to go to the end and turn around and come back. So about the time I get about three-fourths of the way down, your podcast ended. And I thought I'm going to look for something else. So I was scrolling on my phone and I'm looking for another thing to listen to. And I'm like, I've been thinking about this for a long time as I've been watching some of these podcasts, how their experiences mirror my experience and how some of them are different, but that a lot of the general themes are the same. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe I should talk about my testimony as well, because I've never talked about it before the show that I did before this, your podcast. I never talked about it to anyone, no one. I didn't think anyone would believe me. So I said, I don't really want to be on video. I don't really want to be on the internet doing this, but maybe it needs to be shared. It's been a long time. Remember that it happened when I was 17 to 20. I didn't write it down. I'm now in my 60s, early 60s-ish, right? Anyway, so at that exact moment that I decided I said, I'm going to do this. It's like having a kid or anything else you do in your life, you just have to do it. So I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sign up. And I'm still scrolling through my phone. And then about 10 seconds later, as I'm walking down, I'm almost to the end now and of the sidewalk, this guy comes around the corner and he's very well dressed. And I live in a nice area. There's a lot of retired military people here, which is wonderful. But you can tell he's like dressed, everything's tucked. There's not a speck of dust on his shoes. They're shined. He's like perfect. And as he comes around the corner, I'm like, I notice him, but like I notice every other person I've walked by. And he's going around to, he's standing on the opposite side of the sidewalk and I'm standing on my side and I'm looking for another podcast. And as he goes by me, all of a sudden he swerves his path and jumps over, puts his face like right beside my ear and gives this like unholy yell, like right in this scream right in my ear. And I jumped, of course. I was like, what the heck? Scared me. I jumped back and I'm kind of like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden it was like it kind of made me a little mad and upset with him. And I said, really grow up. Just grow up kind of thing. And I kept walking because I thought, okay, I'm going to just ignore him and just keep walking. I'm coming towards the end of the sidewalk. But then something else in me, I was just like, no, I'm a child of God and I don't deserve that treatment. So I said, no, I'm a child of God in my head. Not today, Satan. Not today. So then I turned around and again, I don't know why I'm doing this. In my head, I'm going, you shouldn't be turning around. You should just, let this guy go on. But I did. I turned around and in my head, I'm thinking, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy sword and thy staff, they comfort me. Okay, so then now I'm walking towards this guy. He's maybe 6 feet tall. I'm about 5'8". And as I go up to him, I walk up to him and I stand face to face. I'm giving him the eye, right? Because I'm like, not today. And so in my head, looking him directly in the eye, I say, get behind me, Satan. I'm a child of God. This is in my head. Who is authorized to walk on serpents and scorpions. I'm covered in the blood of Christ. I wear the full armor of God. Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me. It is done. It is done. I'm my head. I'm like, and I don't know why I'm not like angry, like flaming angry, but I'm just stern in my head. I'm just like, "No, this is not gonna happen today." And I'm looking at his eyes. His eyes are so cold, and I was literally standing there for at least 10 seconds looking at his eyes, and he's just looking back at me, and he takes and he actually points for me to go back down the sidewalk the way I came. And of course, now I'm headed back the other way. So I lift my arm and I point the other way, still looking right in his eyes. And then he just slowly turns around and goes inside the Chinese restaurant. This is like a fast food type Chinese restaurant. And he's standing there and he's going to order his Chinese food to take out. Right. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, "Did that just happen?" But his voice when he did that scream, it was like those satanic metal, heavy metal bands. You know how sometimes those lead singers can scream? It was like that, but the frequencies were all wrong. I was like, "There is no way that a human voice could do that." And to literally come around the corner and do that 10 seconds after I decided not to do your show, I was like, "Something does not want me to do this show." And in my mind, I thought that was something satanic manifesting or demonic manifesting through him to basically try and frighten me and tell me not to do the show. And that's why
Wow.
probably I reacted the way I did because I was like, I'm not listening to
Mm.
that. I'm a child of God. I don't have to listen to that. And I'm doing what I'm going to do. So that made me really determined to go through with it. So then I just turned and walked away and went about my day. And I picked another podcast out of yours. And I just was watching it. And then, my mom, when her hair was finished, I picked her up and got my steps in. And we went on our day. And there were a few other things that did happen that day that kind of was like, oh, yeah, something's going on here. But I just kind of ignored them and said, I'm not letting anything get to me on this." And so at about 3 AM, I went to bed at my normal time, and then I'm asleep, and exactly 3 AM, and I don't listen to TV in my room. I always listen to it out in the living room, but I have it, but at exactly 3 AM, my TV turns on all by itself and wakes me up. And I was like, "Okay," I've lived in this house 3 years, never happened before. It happens on the day that I decide to do this. That's not a coincidence. So I get up and I turn off the TV and I kind of, walk around the house and say, "Get out of the house. You're not welcome. This is a house of God and you need to leave." And then I go back to sleep. And I was like, I'm not going to sit here and be afraid. I don't have to be afraid. And so that's what I did. So I guess it kind of backfired because it made me even more determined to do this. And I didn't want to wake up my mom or scare her or anything. So, of course, I didn't tell her about it. So then I guess we'll go to the actual event itself when I was 17. So I told you that, I had some issues when I was younger. I did believe in Jesus. I was baptized. And uh, basically, I'm now at this point, I'm 17 to 20 years old, and I'm going to college, and I'm, being a waitress, trying to make my way through the world. And I was in that relationship that was abusive. And I didn't recognize it as abusive because compared to my childhood, it really wasn't that bad. But it was emotionally abusive and, cheating, you just need to get rid of them. And I should have done that. That was all on me not to recognize that and to get rid of that person, you know, rather than to continue that and then have that tear my self-esteem and my self-worth down. But that's something as I learned as I got a little older. I was still, naive and a little bit not really knowing what to do and things like that. Maybe if I'd had a better father, I would have learned those kind of lessons from them. So I guess what happened then I had decided that I didn't want to be alive anymore. Not because I didn't want to be alive, but because I didn't want to deal with the emotional pain of it all anymore. And I didn't really want to break up with this other person. I loved them, and that was a large part of it, but I should have self-loved, and I didn't have that strength and resilience at that time. Working and going to school didn't help. So I was thinking how to do this. I didn't I didn't want to sin according to against God. If you think about in the Bible, it says, "Thou shalt not kill," right? And at that time, I knew I shouldn't kill, but I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking, you're not supposed to kill other people. But in reality, if you think about the commandment, you shouldn't be killing anyone or anything, including yourself. But I didn't have that kind of I knew it was wrong, though. I definitely knew it was wrong. So I was trying to look for a way to do it that I'd kind of skirt the issue. I thought maybe I'd get a pass because of all that I had been through and all that from God and that sort of thing. So if I picked out like there was a big, huge oak tree that you could go around the curb at a certain speed and it would launch the cars and they would hit the tree. And it was like, that could be an accident and no one would know.
Mm.
Or if I accidentally took too many pills or something with alcohol and we lived near the mountains, something could happen in the mountains. But I knew for me, I was like, I would still know and God would still know. So then I started thinking, and this gets darker is that, I was an epileptic when I was a child. Why couldn't God give me something congenital where He could take it, my life, and then it wouldn't be where I had taken it? He would have taken it, and then I could kind of skirt the system again. And maybe give me a heart attack or something like that. And then the truth is, I didn't want to hurt my mom. I knew that this would really hurt my mom. I knew if I
Mm.
wasn't alive, that would really, really hurt her, but it would hurt her immeasurably more if I unalived myself. So while I was doing that, I was thinking, what, and then I did this. This was at least a month. This was not like a one-time event. So I'm sure at that point, God was getting a little bit aggravated with me to be thinking, why does she keep thinking like this? But uh, as a parent would, right? It's like I have kind of wrong think going on, but I also think he understood. So then I got even darker, and it was 9 o'clock one night, and I was laying on my bed. I was not asleep. I was sitting there and envisioning what it would be like not to be in this emotional pain and to be unalive and buried in the ground. And that it would be so calm and so quiet, and I wouldn't have all this stuff going on, and I could just rest and be in peace, and how tranquil it would be. And about that time, as I'm thinking all this, all of a sudden, God took me from my body and took me out into the heavens. He took me to a place, it was in outer space, and I was alive. I wasn't asleep. I'm, young. I can't go to sleep at 9 p.m. no matter what. As you're 17 to 20 years old, you have to go to sleep in the middle of the night and get up at noon or something. But now I got up at 7 because I had my courses. But um,
Hey, before we get back to the episode, my father has a free gift for you. So let me explain. For those of you that don't know, my father was an underground minister in Kiev, Ukraine. My father risked his life preaching the gospel on the streets of Kiev, Ukraine at the time when it wasn't popular or allowed. And he also raised a family of 9 children in the most hostile environment. There's so many lessons that he learned throughout his journey. And for years, I've been begging him. I was saying, Father, please write a book about your life, about your journey. And he would always dismiss it as, who wants to read a book about my life? And I was like, my children, me. And so, you know what? Finally, he sat down, he wrote the book. He did it in like 1 week. I translated the book to English, and both of us, we want you to have this book for absolutely free. And the way to get this book is super simple. Go to Instagram, find me at God's Voice Today, and send me a private message with the word book, and I will automatically send you a link to get it. And now, let's get back to the episode. Enjoy.
so as he took me out of my body, he's showing me the universe, and we are traveling at, tremendous speeds, light speeds. And he is showing me as we're traveling vast distances through the universe, He is showing me his creation, which I never thought about this before, but he is showing me galaxies and universes. And, we're seeing like the Milky Way, and we're seeing spiral galaxies and planets and suns. And he's showing me this, that he created all of that, which I never gave it any thought before. When they said, God created the heavens and the earth, I thought maybe he snapped his fingers and there was a big bang sort of thing. But it wasn't like that. He planned it all out and made each thing individually the way he wanted it to be. And I was, looking at all this stuff, and we weren't talking. We were just going through the universe in a flash very quickly, but seeing a lot of stuff. And as we were doing that, um, I could see heaven off in the distance. It was like a big golden city, beautiful, this light emanating from it. And there were all these beings. You could see them in the distance, that they were walking around and doing, whatever they were doing. I couldn't see whether they were angels or humans or what they were, but I could see, humanoid type shapes in this city. And that was heaven. And God was communicating with me. Uh, and at that moment, I could see how glorious the entire creation was by God, just how beautiful and how perfect it all was. And at that moment, my consciousness expanded. And when I say expanded, I instantly knew everything. It wasn't like a download. It was like all of a sudden, all the questions that I had before were answered, and I had the knowledge that was just missing, from my life. And I felt like all of a sudden I had come back home and it had been restored to me. And everything made such perfect sense. I was like, oh, okay, that's why this happens. That's why that happens. And you could see that there was a system and a complexity and a beauty in it. And uh, I felt basically like I was home again, and a veil was lifted from my mind at that point, and I was being allowed to see that from God. And basically, the past, the present, the future, it was all planned, and it was so simple and complex and beautiful all at the same time. And you could see the life in everything. Plants are alive, but there it's like it's almost like everything has God inside of it. And his light and love flows through us there in a way that you may see a little bit of it here, but not the same way. Uh, and the colors, your eyes are different there. The colors are more vibrant, and I could see everything. Like, I could zoom in. I could zoom in and zoom out. So you can almost see things almost at a microscopic level if you wanted to, or zoom out and see like the whole planet type of thing if you wanted to. So uh it was just really magnificent, and I was really impressed with just the minute detail and the plan and the system in general. And I could see that his plan and everything, it was God's plan, and his plan was still in progress. So then at that point, we kind of went back to the earth, and we were standing at the earth. He was about 10 feet, 15 feet away from me at that point, and we're looking down upon the earth. And, uh, the earth, we could see, the blue oceans and all of that. It was very peaceful and serene, and we're just kind of calmly looking over at it. And then I look over towards God, and God is looking at me, and he was looking at me with such love. And when he is okay, so he doesn't communicate through like words. He communicates through feelings and thoughts, or for me at least anyway. I think he could communicate through words, but that's how we were communicating. So I could just feel the love and feel how much basically that uh that he cared about me and how warm he was towards me. And as he's looking at me, all of a sudden I'm like, I look kinda to my left and to my right. Is he looking at me? Who with such love? I'm thinking he's maybe looking at someone who's come up beside me or something, 'cause he couldn't be looking at me like that. So as I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, "Who, me?" I look back at him, and he indicates, yes, he's looking at me, and he was smiling at me. Again, I couldn't quite see his facial features or anything. He had this light coming out of his face. I mean, the whole being was light, but he had, in particular, there was a huge amount of light coming from his face, but it was almost like I could see shadows, maybe, of features every once in a while, but I really couldn't see it. But I just knew because he was communicating, I could instantly know his thoughts and he could instantly know mine, that he was saying, "Yes, I'm looking at you." It's kinda like he was a little amused by it because, he brought me on my body, he'd showed me all these wonders and things of the universe, and then I'm still thinking, "Is he looking at me? And how could he be loving me that much?" So, for me, it was it was a little bit overwhelming at that point. But I would say he looked just like a person. um, he was big in presence, huge in presence, but he looked like a person when he was with me, and he was physically fit, and, he had muscles and everything. He was wearing uh, a white gown, kind of, mid-calf kinda length. He had sandals on, he had muscular thighs and everything. He had a rope belt around him and kind of like like gray wavy hair. Uh But, again, the key thing was that when he looked at me, I could really tell he was looking at me. And he has kind of these, um I guess he had a I had never felt such love in all of my life, and I don't think I will ever feel such love in this earthly life as I felt there. But it was a father's love for a young daughter, maybe like a teenager or someone, a young adult, that was pure and forgiving, and basically, it was like he was proud to see me after a long time of not seeing me, and he was proud of me. And so this is really the first time I understood the true depths of God's love as a true father for us as his children, and for me in particular, because again, I didn't have any self-love, so I couldn't imagine that he would love me that much. But he does, and he loves all of us. Um the thing was also that he was a little stern. I could tell he brought me there for a reason, and as much as he loved me, he was not quite pleased with me, with my actions and what I had been thinking and doing. I'm not living a perfect life. I wasn't drinking and going out and partying per se, maybe a little bit, but not very much at all, especially compared with others. But, uh, I won't say that I never did it, but I had a boyfriend and, I wasn't going to church and that sort of thing, but he was particularly displeased that I could be thinking that, here he has made his creation, and he deems it, in his eyes, perfect for whatever plan that he has, and I am just I'm like a little ant compared with him, and I could be doubting his plan or his perfection in the being that he created in me, and have no confidence and not love myself when he could. So I could tell he was disappointed in that. Well, that being said, uh, I knew that when he was speaking to me, he was to be taken seriously. And all of a sudden, I realized, and I thought, "Oh, no. He knows everything about me. He knows all my sins. He can hear my thoughts right now. He knows everything I've done, good, bad, ugly." And all of a sudden, I got a little afraid of, "Oh, no, this is where he's gonna smite me." So I'm kinda bracing myself because 'cause I'm thinking, "He's so powerful, and then I'm waiting, and he doesn't smite me. He still loves me." I'm like, "Well, how can that be?" Right? And I'm looking kind of at myself, and I could just feel the sin and see the sin, and I feel so impure, and I'm looking at him, and he's so pure and holy, and I'm like, "Wow, I'm so dirty compared with him." And yet he still loves me, and it's like he doesn't see the sin. I'm like, "How can he not see it?" I'm thinking, and then I realize he can see it, but he's not seeing it because of Jesus's blood. He's given me grace, and so all that is like it's completely forgotten to him. So he's loving me just as pure and with the best intentions, and I can't even love myself like that and see myself in all the sin, and I feel really bad at that point because here I am, I've got all this sin, you know, And I'm thinking, what a disappointment to God that He made me and even made the rest of us. And here we are, we constantly live, in the flesh on the earth and sinning, even if you're saved. And I was saved and I was still, living in sin. So I'm kind of feeling really bad at that point. Um, but he didn't. The love just kept coming. Um, and it was like he couldn't see the sin. So then we're looking back at the world, and I could see kind of like these flashes of light on the world, and sometimes they were a little small, like lightning, and sometimes they were big, huge flashes. But I could also see that there were tempests and great storms moving over the earth, as moving across and in the atmosphere, and it really saddened him. And I felt really bad for him as he's looking at it. I could see he was sad. And I realized then that it wasn't actually storms. It was a great war raging between good and evil, between the principalities and high places, and the light was the people who were resisting, or maybe angels who were resisting, and they were fighting this war. But a lot of his children were being lost during this war, and they weren't coming to him. And there were plenty who were, but not compared to the numbers that are being lost. So it really made him quite sad. Um, and it made me sad to look at it. So his children were being lost to the enemy, and as we were looking at it, I could see that there was a great darkness that was coming over the world, and amongst that. So then the next thing is God showed me a tapestry or a rug. It didn't have, like, figures of, like, little houses and little people on it, but it was like a rug, and it was about 4 feet wide, and it was rolled up to about 10 inches, and then about 3 or 4 feet were laid out on this table. And when I looked at the tapestry, I could see that that tapestry represented God's plan, and it was very intricate and complex and good. And all of the billions and billions of lives were represented in it and interwoven in threads throughout this tapestry. And it was a work in progress. It wasn't finished. Maybe the end is finished. Like if you read Revelations, it tells you exactly how it's going to end. And you know the past, you know how that was. So that's done. But it was a changing plan that could be changed by God according to circumstances in His will at any time. So, and it also could change according to our lives. So if we decided, our path in life was a good path and we wanted to be aligned with God's purpose, we were more in the plan. But we could also decide that we did not want to be in the plan. And so some threads and lives were fully interwoven, and some had completed their paths, thousands of years ago and were done. But other threads were woven in to the tapestry and had their threads sticking out of the tapestry because their lives either weren't done or their paths weren't set. And as I'm looking at it, God showed me my thread, and my thread was sticking out. And I was like, oh, so yeah, well, I'm, 17 to 20 and my life isn't over. So that kind of makes sense. But it also meant, uh, basically that I didn't have to take place in the plan. I could choose not to participate. And also, if I decided to unalive myself, that would be, I would not be participating in the plan, and that uh, someone else, because these threads are all interwoven, someone else could be interwoven into the plan to do God's will and to bring whatever that purpose was, my purpose or God's purpose was, to fruition. So, um, so it was dependent upon my choice. He gave us the free will to decide ourselves what we wanted to do, and he was hoping to gently guide me not to unalive myself and to take place in his plan as a beloved daughter, like he was giving a gentle correction to me. Um, I guess the other thing that really struck me, and it was right around that time, is that he knew all the hair he knew the actual number of all the hairs on my head. You read some in the Bible, you don't know whether it's a parable or something, but he actually knew it, and I was just amazed that he had that kind of knowledge on all of us, that he loved us so much and built us so specifically, all different, all beautiful, and all having different, abilities and different things we wanted to do in life, but we still fit in his plan accordingly. So we're not perfect, but in his eyes, we were built perfectly as his, kind of like a vessel or a temple. Okay, so he also showed me that as small and sinful as I was compared to him, that with that free will, he would allow me to unalive myself. I don't think he would do it, but he would allow me to do it. And basically, he would replace me in his plan, and that I had to live by faith and believe in him, and I couldn't change the plan myself. I could change my participation, but the plan was his, and his plan was a lot bigger than me, a lot bigger than anyone else. So we just needed to kind of go along with the plan, and then we could decide how big our we could, kind of influence how big our roles were, but ultimately that was his choice. So if he allowed me to if I unalive myself, because he would allow it, he would accept my decision and just put someone else in the plan besides me. And so, that kinda stung my ego, quite frankly. I was like, "I'm replaceable," you know? And we all are, but it kinda stung my ego a little bit, but then I'm also like, "Well, he's a god, and I'm not a god, so it makes perfect sense." But I guess it just shows that's a little bit of pride right there, to be so small compared to God, and then when he says, "Okay, I'll allow you to do it," be like, yeah, so that's pride. But I also, when I did that, I also realized the bigger thing I realized is I didn't wanna hurt such a glorious, wonderful being. I felt bad that he would be hurt by doing so, uh, and I felt really sinful because of it, quite frankly. So, the other thing, he was disappointed, but he wasn't even angry at me. I thought maybe he'd be angry at me, but he wasn't. He still loved me just as much as a few minutes earlier, and that to me was incredible. I was like, if that were me, I'm not sure I would feel the same. I might be a little angry at my child, but he wasn't. So even though he was disappointed, um, about that time, let me sit back. So about that time, I'm looking at this plan and all the details of it, and trying to understand the complexity of it, which I couldn't. His thinking is so different from my thinking, is bigger. Even as I knew all that stuff, I'm still like an ant compared to him. He's so powerful, and my thinking just isn't the same. So as I'm looking at it, all of a sudden, I realized that I wanted to know what the burning question that we all want to know. And so I'm sitting there thinking in my head, should I ask it? I've come all this way. If I don't ask it and I go back to Earth, I'm going to be regretting it for the rest of my life that I didn't take this chance to ask it. So, and as I'm doing that, all of a sudden I realize, again, he can read my thoughts, right? He knows what I'm thinking. So I'm like, oh no, he knows what I'm thinking, you know? But I'm like, I'm going to ask it anyway. I hope he doesn't smite me. So I'm looking at him. I'm like, God, like, when are you coming back to Earth, and when will your plan be fulfilled? And then I'm like waiting. I'm like, oh, this is when he's going to get mad at me. No, he doesn't. So he takes it very seriously. And again, I think he took it very seriously, but again, I think he thought it was a little bit amusing that I would ask. But he said basically the plan is his, and it's not for me or anyone to know. That's he will choose when and where and how, and that we have to live by faith and be a part of the plan. Sometimes, we have all these things happen in plan, and we think that God's not with us, but He is. We're supposed to live by faith and basically keep going and keep believing in God and trying to do the things that we're supposed to do on earth here for God, and love our neighbors and love God. So basically, at that point, um, I was ashamed to think that I would disappoint him, and I asked him for his forgiveness, and he gave me his forgiveness, and I vowed from that point forward that, uh, no matter what, I would never unalive myself and that I would live for his plan and move forward with my life in faith, not knowing. And part of that was also that if I came back here to earth, that I would not have all this knowledge that he had just given me. I would not know everything. I would have to live in faith. I would not remember most of everything that had gone on there. I'm surprised I remembered this much. I kind of wrote it down before the podcast, and I was like, I really do remember quite a bit of it. But I hadn't thought about it in so many years. I was amazed at how much I retained, quite frankly. So I had to go back. I had to live in faith, and I accepted that. And basically, he wiped those memories from me and instantly sent me back to my body on earth. And basically, from that point, I kind of lived. I knew when I went back to earth, um, that well, I had to have faith in the plan, but I had to have faith that God would bring whatever the plan was to fruition. Even I have no idea what it is for me or for anybody else. So that too was part of it. And he took the emotional pain away. When I went back, I felt a great relief in that I wasn't feeling those feelings anymore about wanting to alive myself. And I realized that I needed to take responsibility for my life and make changes in my life myself, and I did, and, basically, I never felt that way again. I don't know how to explain it any other than that, and the other thing I guess I kinda learned is that I think there are people who are under oppression, and I think maybe I was under oppression to be thinking all those, like, I think there was something that would have been really happy if I had taken my life at that point because I don't think I would have been in heaven. I think I would have been someplace else. I think there was something that would have been just fine with me doing that, and it wasn't of God. And I think there are other people and toxic people and things that go on in this world, kind of like that guy where all of a sudden he swerved and screamed in my ear, that are spiritual oppression that go on that I didn't recognize at that point. I kind of recognize it now as I've gotten closer to God and I've been reading the Bible and I've been taking it more seriously. As far as when I was a kid, you say, okay, they're casting out demons. Well, there aren't any demons here, so they don't exist anymore. But I think there are lots of evil and lots of things that exist kind of on a spiritual uh, realm that we don't really accept maybe in our culture, or maybe we just kind of overlook some of it. Or as you stay in the flesh, they don't come into play because you're going along with the plan. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Man, so much to unpack. I don't even know where to start. But I am curious, Kelly, how long did that experience last?
I don't think it lasted very long. I'm going to say maybe in this realm, I'm going to say maybe 10 minutes or so. But in that realm, it felt like a long time. We were not, we just kind of like this conversation didn't take 10 minutes. That one didn't either. But I didn't actually look at the clock, but I don't think much had gone by. It wasn't like it was like midnight or anything. It might have been like 9:20 or something like that, 9:15.
You said that God communicates with feelings and love, but did you actually hear his voice?
No, I didn't. He spoke to me in my head and I felt his feelings. He did not speak to me through like here, like we would be hearing here. No. I know he could have though, but that's just not what we were doing.
I know it's virtually impossible to describe that unconditional love on the other side. A lot of people tried. I know a lot of people tried, but it's probably hard coming back from that unconditional love, feeling all of that to this reality. What was it like moving forward with that?
Yeah, it really is because it's just not the same, and I had to accept uh, that I wouldn't feel that here, and it was really kinda hard and cold, I'll say, here, compared with there. So, I think really I was seeking that kind of love, but it just doesn't exist here the same way, So I think part of it is also the faith. He was showing me that he really is there, and to know at all times that he loves me, even if I don't love myself, and he wants me to love myself as much as I love the other people, and he wants me to take care of myself too, and not devalue myself or think that I'm nothing. So it's an internal Holy Ghost kinda thing versus the external flesh thing, and you can't find it here in the flesh. You may think you have it for a while, particularly in a new relationship with someone, but it's just not even close.
Mm. You said he wants you to love yourself. I mean, if you think about it, how can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? And we're so hard on ourselves. And that's why you got to that point, right? You were so ready just to check out at age 17. I'm curious, did you have a strong religious background before that happened?
We went to church all when I was a child, all the way up until I was 12, so and I felt that God was real, and I asked to be baptized and everything, so I did up until about the time I was 12, and then I kinda fell away. None of my friends and stuff were going anymore, my brother never went, so I was starting to feel like I was missing. We would go Sundays and Wednesdays and Bible school and all that. So I kind of felt like I was missing out that the other kids didn't have to go and they were doing all these things. So I kind of fell away from that, but I definitely still believed. And, I read the Bible as a child and, I participated in all the events and everything, and I was happy to do so. It's just, I think, and even after that, you would think, oh, that wouldn't change you and I'd go back to church and stuff. I didn't. I was trying to, uh, make my way through life and get my degree and make money to pay for that degree. So I really didn't have much time. But yeah, I definitely believed as a child, even outside of the experiences that I had when I would have a seizure.
Now, the next question, more like a twofold question. When you were on the other side, were you aware that you were outside of your body, and did you think you were there for good? Like, did you think you were dead? And then when you came back, did it feel like a dream?
It did not feel like a dream at all, and I knew I was outside of my body. I didn't know how I got outside other than God took me. It felt as real as me talking with you here
Wow.
right now. Every bit as real. I knew I wasn't dead. I hadn't had an event. I knew my body was there on the bed, and, basically, I didn't have any control over it in that he took me out, but it definitely happened, and I knew. And I knew he was gonna send me back and let me unalive myself, but he was not going to keep me there. I was not getting a pass like he was gonna stop my heart or make me have a seizure. He was going to make me complete it, uh, but it was still my choice.
Man, so many questions I want to ask, but let's talk about this golden city, this heaven. How close were you able to get to it? Was it more like how sometimes you drive past a big city, it's kind of in the distance? Was it more kind of like that?
It was kind of in the distance, but, think of it like if you were on Lake Michigan taking a tour and seeing the city from, like, a tour boat off of Lake Michigan, so we got quite close to it. I could see the gates and the buildings, and there's just a light that it gave off and the people and everything, but I we didn't go through the gates and go into the city or anything like that, but you could see all the details of the buildings. They had huge skyscraper type buildings and
Really?
houses and all that, but it was just beautifully constructed, and the roads were even like gold and everything. And I don't know if they were gold like the metal gold, but they were gold colored, and just everything was very pretty. And the details, you could see the details on stuff, just like if you were, a couple hundred yards offshore looking at the shoreline of Chicago or New York, going past the Empire State Building or the Statue of Liberty from a tour boat. Yeah, I could see that, and I could see people walking around on the inside. Mhm.
What shocked you most about that experience, just seeing heaven? Anything in particular that stood out?
I guess I thought it was interesting how they had, like, skyscrapers and buildings and stuff like we did. I thought maybe with spiritual bodies, maybe it wouldn't be quite so much like that. Um, but it was, and, again, I don't know that it was solid. I didn't get to touch it or anything to know if it was solid, but I'm assuming it was whatever it is in heaven, solid, I guess. I'm not really sure. But, again, everything was laid out and neat and clean and orderly, and you could see people were walking with purpose. They were doing something, whatever that purpose was. I didn't hear any music or anything. I would have liked to have heard the choirs and all that, but there were definitely gates to get in.
Did you see angels?
I saw beings that were like humans, and I saw some bigger beings that I think might have been angels, but I couldn't see to that level of detail to where I could see, like, whether they had wings or what, but there were some. I could see humanoid beings walking around that I was sure they were human like me, and then I could see some other beings that I felt were more like angels.
Kelly, if you wanted to, would God allow you to walk in the city?
I don't know that he would have allowed me to walk in the city at that time. I kinda think when I was a child, when I met that other being, that that was heaven and I was allowed in as a child. I think because I was still alive here on earth that I might not have been allowed to go in, but I certainly think he wanted to show me that it existed as a true place and that it's something aspirational that I should be thinking, I wanna go there and be there with all the other people who are with God and be thinking, less maybe about the earth and the flesh and all those things, and not thinking so short term. I should be thinking long term. And I think he was giving me a little bit of a correction because I was thinking so negatively. And again, I think it had to be offensive for me being so small. And when I say small, I mean like he is so powerful and all knowing. And here I was questioning his creation and wanting to end it and not perform what I was supposed to be doing in his plan. And he had made me the way that he felt was the way I should be. So it was, in my eyes at the time, I felt it was a little blasphemous, So I don't know that he would have allowed me in because maybe I wasn't as clean as I should have been sin wise.
Hmm.
I'm not sure, but we didn't go in.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious to talk about the tapestry or the rug that you were talking about. But before we get into that, let's talk about this friend Charlie that you were hanging out with during your seizures. Who was that person?
I'm not exactly sure. I will say that I thought he was either an angel who was appearing as a person, not to scare me, or as an ancestor. And the name Charlie is interesting, but let me go back on the angel parts because I felt like he was so gentle and pure and loving himself, but he didn't give me any, like, extra knowledge, and I thought it was interesting that he didn't say, "I came to be with you while you're here." He said, I was sent to stay with you while you're here." Like, I don't know whether he was protecting me or, like, I could wander off or something, but or he it kinda was like he was there to comfort me, quite frankly. He always made me feel like I was safe and okay and everything was gonna be okay. And he also, it was funny, he had a sense of humor, so he was always telling me these kinda corny jokes, trying to make me smile and laugh, kinda like dad jokes, okay? But my dad was alive. He didn't look like my dad. He was in those clothes, like, from the 1850s,
Hmm.
1900s, so he had that big sometimes he'd have that big hat on, and he had a cane. He'd be, like, doing the cane thing, kinda swinging the cane around trying to make me laugh. And, then he was teaching me things like I didn't at that point, I was very young, I didn't know how to dribble a basketball, so he was trying to help me dribble the basketball, and we played, like, horse. You know how you play horse where you're, like, trying to win the game? Of course, I had
Oh, yeah.
trouble throwing the ball up to the how high it was, but somehow he made it so I could once he realized, as I'm trying, as you're a little kid, it's like you're 3 years old and you go to a standard basketball court, the kids they don't have the strength to throw the ball up to the basket. So he was helping me with things like that, and, I think he was letting me win at all these things, pretending like he wasn't, but I'd always, like, just barely win and stuff. And we were playing jacks. Now, the thing about the name is, and I didn't know this at the time because I was too young, and some of the people weren't born yet, I guess some of them weren't. Charles is a family name, so that's what makes me think he could have been an ancestor because my grandfather, who I called him Papa at that time. His first name was Charles, and then my uncle Bill, his actual name is Charles. Well, I didn't know that. I called him Uncle Bill. I had a cousin who was born a couple years after me, so I probably hadn't even met him when I was 2 and a half. his name is Chuck, but his real name is Charles. And then my grandfather's grandfather, his name is Charles. So all along on my grandfather's side of the family, each generation had at least one, if not more, usually the firstborn son was named Charles. So I thought maybe he could be someone in the line, but honestly, I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. I was too young to think to ask. I wish I had asked, but when he told me he was there, to stay with me and that I was safe and okay, I just accepted it. It's like when in the Bible, when they say, if you could have the faith of a small child, I did. He could have been out for complete harm, and he just could have told me differently, and I would have been like, "Okay." So, as an adult, as a child, you're used to adult supervision. I kinda got that same feeling like he was there like a parental figure to watch over me while I was there.
Speaking of there, what was that environment like? Was it similar to that in between where you were at?
No, I think that was heaven. It was the first place I was like a beautiful meadow. And, I was sitting in the meadow, and I didn't know how I got there. I'm looking around, and the flowers and the plants were all around me, and it was so serene and quiet, and as I said, the light is different, and each thing, like each flower would have its own light that it would be kind of emitting, so it was, kinda like everything glowed, kinda like God glowed, and they'd be swaying in the wind and stuff, but it was like they were like they were more alive there than here, and the colors were magnificent, and colors that you can't see here, and the depth. It's almost like a watercolor painting with the light coming through it. So, and there were forests. He was at the edge of the meadow. There was a forest behind him, and there were things like mountains and things like that. And when he was showing me, like when we played basketball, there was a basketball court there, and we played baseball one time. He was trying to teach me how to, you know, play baseball. And so there were other structures that were there, but they didn't. Again, I didn't feel like it was here. It definitely was someplace else and pure and just again, everything was alive and the colors were vibrant.
Isn't that interesting that at 17 you were taken in between, so to speak, because by 17 you probably weren't holy enough, right? Weren't clean enough to be in that environment. But at the young age, you were almost like at heaven, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I was sinning. I had a boyfriend. We were sinning. Uh, you know what I mean? I don't want to say that word, but yes, we were sinning, and I drank a little bit. I sometimes went to these parties. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't praying and reading my Bible. So and I wasn't doing drugs or anything. And I wasn't, everyone else, they party a lot and they were doing all these, a lot of sexual stuff. I wasn't doing that. I always was trying to live by the commandments, but I also recognized that those behaviors were not that good. And, but I wasn't doing the things like my brother, he did, if there was a drug to take, he took it. If there was a party to go to and act wild and crazy, he did it, and he glorified in living in sin. I was trying to live by the commandments and but I also broke them. Like I said, I had the boyfriend, so I was sinning in that way sexually.
Speaking of your brother, where is he today? Did he ever? Because you said he had emotional issues.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I thought because he was doing things that were illegal at a very young age, and I thought he would be in jail after he got out of high school. I wasn't even sure he was gonna graduate high school, and I was kinda looking forward to it because I was like, it would be peaceful and quiet. He was 3 years older than I was, and I was just tired of all the stuff that he used to do and how destructive he was, and it was really hard on my poor mom trying to deal with
I
that.
bet.
And he was a big guy, big and strong and muscular, and, quite frankly, he was a bully. There were a lot of people who were afraid of him. If I said to anyone, it was interesting, I didn't tell anyone that he was my brother, because if I told people that he was my brother, they would instantly back off and all of a sudden be really super nice and respectful because they would be afraid that he would come and beat them up, and he would. If I told him that they did something to me, he saw that as a sign of disrespect towards me and that he owned our family, so to speak, and he would go and take vengeance on them. But how he turned out actually is he started realizing that all his friends were going to, jail for drugs and for selling drugs and things like that, and, he saw how some of them were dying in suicide, or they were I'm sorry, take unaliving themselves, or in, maybe they're, on their motorcycles driving super fast and things happen. So a lot of his friends were dying young, and he decided that the worst thing would be to be locked up in jail. And I don't think he thought he would, uh, have an accident or die like them, but he would not he has, like, ADHD, he didn't wanna be locked up. So he changed his own life, and he went into the Navy, which I thought was particularly funny because he went into the Navy and he had to wear those Cracker Jack uniforms, so because he's gonna have to
Yeah.
have the other sailors lace him up and put him in this uniform, and he's a control freak, so he's not gonna like that. I thought that was hilarious, but I didn't think he'd last, and he did. He did really well in the Navy, and then he got out, and then he had his own little business for a while, and, he's recently just retired. He's got 2 pensions, and he turned out just fine, and the thing about that was is my mom, she would pray for my brother all the time. And she said one time when she was praying for my brother because she felt he would die young or be in jail too. I mean, there were times we had to go pick him up from like the local police that they were holding him. We were lucky that they didn't keep him and charge him. But I can remember when I was about 12 in the middle of the night where we had to go down and pick him up because he had done something else again. And so she felt the same way and she was praying for him all the time. And she said that she heard God told her that if she would remain faithful to him, that he would take care of my brother. So, she felt that was a promise. She's always been faithful, and my brother is just fine, and I was surprised he did quite well for himself, and he's had a good life. I guess the other thing with that is I asked my mom, I said, "Did you pray for me the same way? What did God say about me?" And she goes, "I never prayed for you. You were always so good and so normal that I didn't think I had to pray for you. I thought everything would be okay." And I'm just sitting there thinking if she only knew, because I never told her about this, if
Mm,
she only knew how close she came to not having a daughter.
wow.
But I thought
Yeah,
that
when
was
in
funny
doubt,
too.
pray.
What?
You should, when in doubt, pray for your whole family. My father, God bless him, mom and dad both get up in the morning. My father, in particular, he lists every one of us by name and he goes in greater detail, speaking life over us, over grandchildren. He feels like he's the last one living in the lineage, so to speak. And so he truly feels like it's his responsibility to continue praying for the whole family.
Mhm.
It's beautiful. It's powerful. I know my parents prayed us all back. My brother, you were talking about your brother. I have a brother the same way. Not the oldest, actually both of them. All of them
Mhm.
were like borderline jail.
Yeah.
But now you can't even tell the difference. They're saints. I mean, I can't even imagine them being evil like they were back then. But speaking of your family, we can't talk about your brother without talking about your father because obviously there was some tension between both of them, right? What about your father? Where is he today? Did you ever have that reconciliation with him?
He's deceased today,
Mm,
we did have that reconciliation when I was about 25. I kinda kicked him out when I was 15 of my life because he kept calling and saying really abusive things, and I got tired of it. So I finally just said, you can just stop calling," and because he wouldn't call very much, it'd be like once or twice a year you'd hear from him, and then it was always, like, something abusive, so I would be like it was always like my mom never got paid any of the money, and so maybe he would call and be upset because she was looking for the amount of money or something, but, so I kicked him out, and then when I was about 25, uh we got back together. My grandfather died, and that affected him, that he realized that life does not go on, and so he then wanted to have a relationship, and we had a very adult relationship at that point, and he made the comment a couple times that, we had this adult relationship. He still wasn't really around. It was still, like, once a year. I think he tried for a little bit, and he did, but he got a girlfriend, and he was kinda doing stuff with her. So, he didn't really make a lot of time, but we did have an adult relationship that was, much more positive, and, when we were young, he wasn't supplying any of the alimony or any of the child support. It was very
mm.
or he'd, like, say he was gonna come for Christmas and take us out, and then we'd just be sitting there and he wouldn't show up. So he
Oh,
was doing some very destructive things that
Mm.
and it really affected I will say it affected my brother more than me. I was telling my brother some of these things that my dad did when we were kids, and my brother doesn't even remember them. This was a couple months ago, and so I said, "I can't believe that you can't remember how many times he would arrange to come and pick us up, and we were going out for a holiday, and he just wouldn't show up." And I think he just couldn't accept it. He just couldn't accept how much that our father really didn't love us in the way that a father should love us, and that he was being kinda selfish. As I said, and when he got to in his 50s, he kinda changed, and he then wanted those relationships, but he said, "It's interesting," 'cause his girlfriend had a grandchild, and he said, "I have this great relationship with this child, but you can never go back as far as, like,
Yeah,
I wanna have that kinda same relationship with my children, and I just can't."
that's
And
right.
you can't forget those things. I mean, as much as you forgive him and move on, you're an adult. You can't like him with the same love that you would have had for him when you were a child. You may love him, but it's an adult love. I guess the other thing is one time my mom too, because we didn't have I mean, we went from being he was like a vice president, from having a lot of money, and she put him through school, and then, they didn't get divorced at that time. This was like 1972-ish. And so he just, walked out and left. He was having an affair with someone. And so she didn't have any way to support us. And there was one time she was in church, and when she was in church, she didn't have enough money to buy a gallon of milk for us, the children. And she was in church and just so worried about it. She was like, "We'll be having water, I guess." And at the end of the service, this lady came up, she had taken and put $2 into one of the worship envelopes, the donation envelopes, and gave it to my mom and said, "God impressed upon me that you need this amount of money." And milk was like, I think it was $1.75 or something like that, so it was enough for her to buy a gallon of milk plus tax. And I was like, "Did you ever pay her back?" She was like, "The church was so big, she just came up and walked up and gave it to me and left." And she goes, "I didn't remember who she was, but I thought that was incredible that someone got that message."
See, it's beautiful when God taps on someone's shoulder and does something like that. There's so many events that happen in our lives. I remember in my life, I come from a family of 9 children, huge family, and we were poor. We had to take turns to go outside to play because we didn't have enough shoes for everybody in the family. I always jokingly say that we were vegetarians and didn't even know it because we grew up on rice and potatoes pretty much.
Mhm.
Meat was too expensive. But I remember many times when we were like, that's it, it's the end of us, and something random would happen. Somebody would come and just cover all of our bills for the year or
That's amazing.
bring just enough food or just enough clothes. Always, always seems like it's like at the last minute, right?
Mhm.
But there's something to that. It's almost like, are you going to trust me that I'm going to provide? And it waits until that last minute. I don't know. It's just my personal opinion,
I agree with
but
you.
it
I
is
I think that's
interesting.
absolutely true.
Well, even thinking about your father, and I promise for everybody watching and listening, we're going to get back to the tapestry and all the good stuff as well. But for everybody watching and listening, it's interesting about your father, how he had his wake up moment when there was something tragic that happened in his life, right? Where his father passing away. It wakes you up.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden it makes you think. And I'll never forget when I was working in the hospital, passing food trays in my 20s. And that was probably the best thing that happened to me in my 20s because I saw how fragile life was. One moment you're giving this food to a patient and you're having a conversation with them, and the next moment they're gone. I never forgot how fragile life was. It truly is. And
Yeah,
speaking about life, so many things happen in your life. I'm jumping around. I know I got a
no,
ton of
that's not
questions.
good.
I'm going from one thing to another. But let's talk about, I'm curious about the seizure. I promise we'll get back to the tapestry. You said that at age 12, it disappeared. So there was like a short season where they were happening. What caused those seizures to happen?
We think when I was 2, I had a high fever one day, and I was, completely out of it. Not only just delirious, but just completely out of it, uh, meaning not awake anymore because my fever was so high. And my dad we only had 1 car, and my dad, of course, had the car at work, so my mom had to have, someone drop her off with me at the hospital, and then she went back to watch my brother because my dad, I actually think he was, out of town or something at that point. And so that fever was so high that I wasn't aware of going to the hospital or anything. I was passed out, and the doctor stayed with me overnight working with me on that fever, trying to get that fever down. And I just remember when I woke up in the hospital, again, I was 2. I just remember my mom, she had to leave and go be with my brother and spend the night with her. My mom didn't know whether I was gonna live or die. The doctor stayed all night, and all the nurses took great care of me. And I think that, uh, when I woke up, I was really mad at my mom because I felt like I had been abandoned, and I felt like all I was, they kept putting ice on me and taking blood, and so I was really mad at the nurses too and all that, but I think that's what caused the seizures because I didn't have them before that, and then, I had a lot when I was starting about 2.5 to 5, I had a lot of them, um, and so as I was I took medication for them and everything, but as I was, uh, getting a little bit older, I was getting less and less, so the doctors felt that I would probably grow out of them because they were less and less. They weren't any less serious anytime I had one, and I could have one just unexpectedly, or if I got hurt or something, felt a lot of pain, or got like the wind knocked out of me, I could just suddenly have one. But um, I think that was probably the event that brought that on was that really high fever. My mom, she said she honestly, because I was just completely limp and passed out in her arms, she wasn't sure if I was gonna be alive the next morning. So that doctor, whoever he was, stayed all night and, whatever he did saved me.
I recently interviewed a guy on the God's Voice Daily channel, my other channel, and he had seizures growing up as well. And I remember him telling me that when those seizures were happening, he too, I think, pretty sure it was him. He was saying that he was taken to another place as well
Mhm.
during those seizures. But he said he felt, he said when those seizures would come up, start manifest, whatever it was, it just he starts shaking on the floor. He said it felt like a snake would wrap around him from the top of his head all the way to the bottom. Like that's what he said the feeling was like. Like there's an actual snake wrapping him. So I have somebody in my family who also has experienced many seizures for years, and every time I see him, I always want to ask him, but I always forget. So I'm making a note right now to ask. But let's go back to your out of body experience. Curious. I have to ask this. I can't not ask this question. It's probably the dumbest question I'll ask today.
No, it's all
But
good.
when you were looking over the earth, because my feed lately has been kind of flooded with all these flat earthers and everything happening. What did the earth look like? Was it round? Was it flat?
No, it was definitely round, and it was
Okay.
you could see the curvature of the earth, and you could see it spinning, like, as it was slowly kinda turning, I could see it spinning and more in the sunlight area and everything, you could see that, so no, it looked just like it did today with the continents and the ocean and the clouds and everything, and it looked just like that, and it looked extremely peaceful from that vantage point, except for those, like, white lights and stuff that would kinda randomly go off. Sometimes they were going off, they weren't necessarily in the clouds, those lights, and sometimes it was like it always made me wonder if it was like a Billy Graham, coliseum of people when there'd be a huge area and it would just be lit up, for a little bit, and then it would kinda go dark, or if it would stay lit, or sometimes it looked kinda like lightning, like more individuals type stuff or smaller stuff. Um so, no, it definitely was definitely round.
All right. Well, that's settled.
Well, if you look at a sphere from a big enough distance, it looks flat, right?
Well, I lived in Ohio for a very long time. You can watch your dog run away for 3 days in Ohio. It's so flat.
That's right.
But as you were looking down, you saw spiritual warfare, right?
Mhm.
So there was more, you saw the spiritual side of things.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the purpose of me being there was to reveal how much of life is really not about now, but about the spiritual, and that there is this big battle going on between the principalities and angels and the people on earth who are trying to bring other people to Christianity and bring God's will here. Because really, and I didn't realize that when I was younger, that was supposed to be what we're supposed to be doing down here is taking care of the earth and also trying to, show God's love to other people and be an example to other people. I knew the example part. And then I didn't think about that we were supposed to be disciples of God and Jesus and bring people to God. I thought, I'm one of the sheeple who are in the church, and that's the pasture, and I accept God, and that's, I'm supposed to live my life. I didn't realize that as I started as an adult, I started realizing that. But there definitely are things going on in the spiritual realm that are affected by our prayers and how we live and how people are coming to God or not coming to God. Things like you look at the music industry now, you can, you look at that. It's really, I feel sorry for some of the children who are being brought up and as a woman to see that they're dressing and doing all these really sexual moves. They're being sexualized at a very young age, and I'm like, that's kind of evil. That definitely is evil. That is not something that should be going on with young girls, or they're dressing very provocatively and very little clothes and this sort of thing. So, and all the symbols and the imagery and the words and the music. Sometimes I have to turn now, and I didn't used to because I love music. Now I have to sometimes turn the song off if I hear certain things in the song. It's like, I don't think God wants us to listen to that. That to me is something that it wants me to become accustomed to it. If you think about the music now versus 20 years ago, how much further along things have gotten as far as just how evil they are. And that's what's kind of was going on there as I was looking on the earth. You could see again, the white flashes of light, but you could also see these storm clouds that were going in and they were opposing it. And there were definitely beings in there fighting for, all of us. But uh, again, it was also on a higher realm, things that we were not participating in here necessarily. We had our role, but this was much bigger and more aligned with, the angels and principalities and stuff.
By the way, Kelly, I know it's well over an hour now. Are you good on time? I want to make sure that
I'm fine.
I'm not getting you in trouble.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, good. Well, let's talk about the tapestry and the rug. It's interesting how you have a choice to make. You can be part of it or you can be cut off, which I'm assuming if you're cut off, where do you go?
Well, I don't know whether I guess there's two things. I thought maybe he could end my life and just decide, okay, you don't want to be a part of it, you're done, and then I could be sent to hell, quite frankly. And then the other part of me said that it would be, and when I say that, if you think about the Bible, I can't remember the name. I think it's Ahab was the one who, I can't remember the name of the guy. He sold the land. He was going to give it to the disciples to fund the disciples' work, and he sold the land and told everyone he was going to donate the money. But then, let's say he only was giving 80% of it, so he kept a part of it for himself. So God kind of killed him right then and there. And then his wife came, and she didn't know her husband was dead, and they asked her the same question, how much she was donating, and she too gave the lower amount instead of the true sales price of the land, and then she was instantly killed too. So it could go like that, or it could have been that I would have been allowed to come back here and unalive myself, and then, of course, I would have been in a different place. I was hoping that God would kinda give me a pass, but I kinda knew as I was thinking about it that I don't think he would have given me a pass. I think I would have been in a very different place. Did that answer the question? I'm not sure I answered the question.
Yeah. Well, and oh man, I wouldn't want to find out what that place would be. I have an idea. But it's interesting this tapestry or rug, you said it represents God's plan. So you saw God's plan in action, so to speak. And it's interesting how your thread was sticking out like it was still work in progress. But this whole tapestry, that the whole thing, what did it look like as far as like were there different colors? What was it, colorful, colorless? What did it look like?
Okay, so it was primarily red in color, and I remember wondering about that when I saw it because it was primarily red, but there were a lot of other threads in it. It was like each thread represented a life, and if you think, and now it's like, what, 8 billion people, but maybe then it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 billion people. Each one of those threads kind of represented the people who wanted to participate or our lives, and it was like God was trying to shape our lives and they were all the lives were interwoven. They could be interwoven twisted, or they could actually have kind of branches that went out, and they made this tapestry. There wasn't pictures like a house or people or anything like that. It was primarily red, but those colors kind of ran throughout, and then they put another thread in and it would run, for the length of that life of that person. And my impression was at that time was that the color red was the blood of Jesus, and that we were all
Oh,
interwrapped into the blood of Jesus. That's what was making the plan holy, I guess, as far as, if you were unholy enough, your thread might get snipped and you might go the other way, but you had the choice of what you were doing. So the colors were there. There were, blue, yellow, greens, oranges, every color you can think of. But the primary base color was kind of like a blood red, not quite burgundy, but a really deep kind of red color. And it was very beautiful. It was almost like silk, and the threads were very fine. They weren't like thick threads. And then you could look at the tapestry and kind of see, if you looked in it, remember I said my eyesight was different, you could kinda zoom in and see what the intention was with that plan, where he was going, how he had built this, and he was going towards this endpoint of this certain action for these people, that sort of thing. So you could zoom in and see that kinda detail. And you can imagine with, if there's I don't know the actual number. Let's say there's 4,000,000,000 people on the earth, having all these threads and trying to bring all of them to participate in whatever his plan is for them, that it was quite complex, but it was beautiful, and, I could see how each person fit in exactly the way he wanted them to fit in, even with all our different, creeds, colors, abilities, natural, our desires on what we wanted to do and how we wanted to be in life. So it was really quite beautiful, and, as I said, he get you can be snipped from it if you were and he could replace you.
depart from me, I never knew you. Don't want to hear that. But
Mhm.
I love how that illustrates that we are part of a bigger plan. And you said you can zoom in and you can see the trajectory of that. Like it's evolving. It's not set in place. I'm sure God had an idea how it's going to go. He had his first choice, second choice, right? But if this first choice decides to unalive themselves and not be a part of this tapestry, he still adjusts and goes on, and you can see, like you said, the story, how it unfolds. It tells a bigger picture, bigger story, but almost like we get to co-create, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's exactly it. He wants us to participate and co-create with him. We're not necessarily creating this, at his level, but we are building what he wants to be built, and he wants us to be a part of it. And and that growth is part of what we're supposed to do here. I'm very different than when I was 17. I couldn't do the things I could never have done this and come on here. I'm still uncomfortable coming on here, quite frankly. But I said it's something it wouldn't bother me to speak in person with people. It's on video and, it's on the web forever and that sort of thing. But I couldn't have done any of that. I when I was in college and I had to give my first speech, I was, like, shaking and stuttering and
Well, I'm with you
sweating.
on that.
So
Same here.
we grow and we become, and he's helping us do that, and we're facing these challenges, and that's part of what this life trajectory is, but he also wants us to believe in him. Now he knows the end point, and, just like Revelation said, he knows that end point, and he's going to get to that point. Now, I don't know when he will get to that point, although it seems like we're getting closer, but that point is set, and he knows what that point is. And I say we don't even understand the what that endpoint is exactly on the level of detail. He knows, we don't know, because he said this is what it's gonna be, but not how it's gonna be or who's gonna do everything in that plan and how many people are gonna be participating. We don't know all that. That's for God to know, but he knows exactly what he wants, and he will take it there and build it the way he wants to, and then everything that, in the past is done, but everything from here on is is a little bit malleable as far as timing and who's gonna do it and how it's gonna do it. Like, you made the decision to do the podcast, but it didn't come to fruition for 10 years, and you thought it would be tomorrow, but actuality, God wanted it in 10 years, right? Otherwise, he would've said, "You're doing it tomorrow, and get up and start podcasting." So it's his plan, and that gave me faith. I didn't worry about after when I came back to Earth that I wasn't doing God's work and going out, and I still don't know what my role is. I don't have like like you knew he told you that you were going to do that. I have to go by faith. That's what God said. I have to go by faith, and I don't know what my role is. But I also had faith that I didn't need to worry about it, that he could make it come to pass. All I had to do was go and try and be a good person.
Well, Kelly, your role could have been even this interview. You don't know how many people are going to hear this. It could change people's lives,
It could
thousands,
be.
if not millions. Think about this, what you can accomplish with one interview, one conversation, you sharing on YouTube and thousands, if not millions of people seeing it. And that's more than somebody will do in a lifetime. You can reach more with just 1 hour, 2 hour conversation than if you were to bump into these people in your life. It would have to take multiple lifetimes to have, to share your conversation with them one-on-one. But it feels good knowing, it brings me peace, knowing that my thread is woven in that tapestry. I can just almost see it sticking out, still work in progress. It's probably a ruggedy one.
Yeah, no, I
but
think
it's
yours
there.
is firmly stuck in there. It may be sticking out because it's in progress, but it's not going anywhere. It's going to be there, and it's going to be through to the end. You're going to have a good trajectory, and I agree absolutely with you on this. Maybe that this is where I was supposed to be, and I have a lot of discernment on things sometimes now that I didn't have back then. And sometimes I see stuff and I'm like, "Well, that's godly, and that really isn't," and that I wouldn't have even questioned back then because you get that experience. So, but I also think some of it's local, like, um, for example, my mom, she's elderly, she needs someone to take care of her, so, part of that is, you're supposed to honor your parents, and that's what I'm doing, and I think that
Huge.
I was meant to, quite frankly. Or, you're helping. I worked at a homeless shelter for 5 years, once a month for 5 years. So that, it wasn't for me, but I'm hoping that these kinda daily acts of kindness and contributing in a
Absolutely.
loving way to
Ripple.
everyone is also that's really, if you read in the Bible, that's what God wants you to do.
It creates a huge ripple. And it breaks my heart when I hear mothers say, "Oh, I wish I've done something big in this on this life, in this life." They raised a family. Oh my gosh, you brought a kid. You don't know that kid could be the next Billy Graham. And being a mother is probably, in my opinion, probably the highest calling you can have. Um, to me, so when I hear stay-at-home moms thinking that they're not doing anything significant, it hurts my heart because what they're doing is way more significant than even probably this podcast, in my opinion.
There's a lot of both, right? Because like, when my mom, when she was so worried about that gallon of milk, we could have probably survived and had that gallon of milk, not had that gallon of milk for a week, but that she was so loving and so concerned, and she sacrificed so much for us. We would go to the doctor if we were sick. She never went to the doctor. You know, she prayed for us all the time, but yet she would self-sacrifice and do anything for us. So to your point, there's a huge role and we both turned out okay. And think if she hadn't done that, if she had been where we might have ended up.
Well, and I think about my mother. She would stay up all night. She would make socks and underwear for us out of old clothes, donated material. And she prayed for us all. She would ask for mentors to come into our lives. And she prayed that all of her children will be serving in some way for the Lord.
Mhm.
And I always kind of laughed at that. But look at me now. And my older brother started a Russian speaking God's Voice today. I'm helping him. My other brothers are involved. They're starting. So, yeah, it's all because a praying mother, parents, both of them, prayed us back. And I look at my wife. My gosh, my wife is my wisdom. I look at her, how she, I'm gonna cry just to talk about, but how she handles everything, how she manages the household, and it's a calling. It's a calling. And I want to touch upon one other thing, and that's when you asked him, when are you coming back? And that answer, which, we went through a season where a lot of people were predicting. So that settles it right there. Once and forget, right? Not for us to know. He has this plan, but going back to the tapestry, right? It's a work in progress. The most important thing you can do is being busy. So when he does return, you're doing his will, his work, so that way you can hear, well done, my good and faithful servant.
That's exactly it, and I wanna hear those words and not that I was just lukewarm and I didn't ever, take a stand and be one of the ones that get kicked out. I don't wanna be the salt that lost its flavor, but I definitely agree with you, you know, as I said, the end point is set as far as what he wants to come about. We don't know all those details, but if he's trying to save and bring as many children to him as he can, maybe he decides that the end point isn't as near as we think because he wants to wait a little longer to save more people because he doesn't want those people. I mean, he really loves us. It's amazing. And I feel like he is so saddened that he is losing any individual to basically go to hell or that they don't love God. All he wants is his children to come to him. So he can very well decide to wait, but there are certain things that have to come to pass that he's done to give us an idea of when it will be, and we can look at those and say whether or not they've all come to pass. But even once they come to pass, doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. It could happen 10 years, 20 years. We don't know, and that's part of it.
Yeah, because of all the things you just shared, it makes it hard to predict. So we should not be in the predicting business, right? We should be too busy serving his creation, loving people, loving them to the Lord. And you mentioned something during your experience that you had this supernatural knowledge. It's like everything made sense. When you came back, did any of it stick with you? Did any of it come back with you? If so, what kind of things came back with you that to this day you still think about?
Well, clearly everything that I've talked about here came back with me. I didn't really think about it that much when I was at that time. I was so relieved that everything I was feeling so much better emotionally. But as I prepared for this, I was writing things down and I was like, wow, I really remember so much more than I thought I would. But definitely the idea that how spiritual things are. When I was reading the Bible as a child, I was more reading it as in like, this is how it's supposed to be. Now, as I see kind of in what's going on in the world, you can tell that there's been very negative influences that are going on. There's still a lot of really wonderful influences going on, but you can see how it's kind of getting darker and darker. And I would at that time when I was younger, I wouldn't have questioned those to think that that was something that might be going on with the principalities or leading us to accept certain behaviors that we wouldn't question as being negative or evil back then. So I definitely see that now, and I see a lot of difference in, how, um back a long time ago, people were not quite as self-centered, and also, I guess a really big thing, God doesn't care about the things that we care about down here. We care about status and money and having a good job and all that stuff, which is, it's nice to have a good job so you can bring stuff home, but there's a lot of things that they mean nothing to him. He's really more interested in how you live your life and your actions and that you're supposed to love everyone else and love him and what you're doing with your intentions and things like that. So it's completely here we're so busy trying to live kind of in the flesh and do all these things and have all these kind of superficial experiences that really aren't that important. Trying to fill yourself up with things that are just superficial and really kind of meaningless and they mean nothing to him. His thoughts are very different, and I don't think I would have had any of those thoughts if I had not had these experiences.
Earlier in the very beginning, you mentioned that kind of what got you to the place where you wanted to take your own life was this. Obviously, you were mistreated, but you were taking on too much. And when you said that, I just think of all the people listening, watching right now that just feel stretched. They're taking on too much. Curious, as years went on, you probably had a lot of time to process everything. When when it comes to that one issue, taking on too much, being stretched thin, what did you learn about that? What is your biggest lesson with that? How do we be in this world but not of this world? Not be so consumed here, not take on too much, but be that balance, that perfect balance that we're looking for. Do you have a good answer for that?
I still struggle with that today, quite frankly. Not as much as I did then, as far as, and when I start feeling like really dark or depressed or something, then I know that I've gone too far into trying to do too much. I still try and fix things. Still blame myself for things that I shouldn't be blamed for. So I try to be cognizant of that. And I try to have balance, as far as like, you need time off, you need to go walk in nature. You go walk in nature, you can't help but see God everywhere. I was a material scientist, so I looked at things under the microscope, a lot of different materials, and everything is as beautiful under the microscope as it is if you went out and looked around in nature on a microscopic scale, which that is incredible. That is not a coincidence, how things can be so ordered and beautiful, and on if you're looking at it under a microscope or a scanning electron microscope, but 10,000, 200,000 times, there's a beauty there, and a structure that is definitely not random. So I would say I still struggle with, I wanna do things to show my self-worth, or sometimes I have external values of self-worth, and I need to have internal values, and I think that's a lot of what God was showing me. So I have to be cognizant of it, and I get better at it, and then some days I kinda fall back into it. And I can do it. I have a high workload. It doesn't bother me to work. I love to work. But I have to then say, "Yeah, you're working to do things that really go enjoy yourself, and spend some time with your friends, and have a social life, and make it a well-rounded life, rather than just being focused on, if I do this task, it's gonna make me feel good inside, because it really isn't. It's a short term, it's kinda like a short-term fix. It's almost like a drug hit, right? You get that dopamine hit, but it's not real. So I still struggle with that, but I also know, above everything else, that he's always there. Jesus and him and the Holy Spirit are always there. And so now, as I've aged, I've tried to, uh, and forgiveness is a big part of this too, is I try to give it to God. Sometimes I hold on to things, and it takes me a while to forgive. I can't say I forgive everything. It's actually the big things I can forgive pretty quickly. But it's like sometimes you've got this coworker or this person, and you forgive them every night before you go to sleep, and you ask God to help you with forgiving, and you're getting there, and then they take and stick the knife in and twist it the next day,
Mm.
and then you're back to feeling bad about that person. So you kinda have to keep every single day working on that, and giving it to God.
That trauma carries over from childhood. I grew up very poor, ridiculed all the time, being a charity case. And as an adult, I'm 38 now. I see how much, even though I hate to admit it, but I see how that scarcity mindset, a lot of times when people go through a traumatic experience, their upbringing, and they default as drugs and alcohol, that's like, wow, that's bad. But some people will default to workaholics,
Mhm.
become workaholics. And that's still trauma, right? You didn't truly
It
deal
is.
with it. And I see that in myself, this, because I've experienced such poverty to where I almost have this fear that it will come back again. And so I work super hard, sometimes not just to, because I want to provide for the family, but mainly out of fear. And I think you should never do anything out of fear, right?
Mhm.
And I can see that trauma. And I'm thinking about your brother when he was talking, when you were guys were talking, and he couldn't remember his father doing these things to him, making promises, never showing up, how hurtful that was. And I remember having a conversation with my twin brother, my identical twin brother, Sergey. And he was telling me stories from our childhood. He's like, remember when our teacher told us that Proknevsky is the best thing that ever happened to you if you guys move to the United States? Kind of like, you guys are worthless. You'll never make it to any, you never become anything great in this life. And she said, the best thing that could ever happen to you if you move to the United States. And how funny That's what happened to us. We moved to the United States and it was the best thing that ever happened to us. But I don't remember that. She's like, she was talking to us. And that's trauma too, right? You just
Mhm.
tune it out. And I've experienced that trauma as well.
I think you're absolutely right. That poverty, living in huge poverty and having that sort of upheaval, like you had the poverty and then you moved here and everything, that definitely comes into it. And you don't remember all the stuff, like, but no one can remember all the stuff anyway. Everyone
Yeah.
remembers what's important to them. But it definitely, to your point, that fear of being poor, that fear. So you work harder than other people because you want to be successful, so you won't be poor. I definitely had that, and I did, quite well for myself, and so did my brother. He said the same thing. He said his greatest fear is that someday he'll be poor again. And so, he's got 2 retirements, and so he feels pretty good now. But he worked a lot harder than a lot of other people and missed out on other things because of it. And I did the same, quite frankly. But I did it, and didn't know about how trauma. I didn't know any of that at that time. But now looking back and, as I've learned and seen and read things, I've learned a little bit more about that. But it also, on the other side of the, double-edged sword, is we think that trauma made us the strong, resilient people that we are today that enabled us to be successful. There's a lot of our friends who grew up with everything and they've got nothing, and their lives, some of them were lost to drugs, alcohol,
Mm.
unalive themselves. So it can break you or it can make you better. And I think, God wants us to overcome those things and live in faith. Not everyone can. And to your point, but now here you are.
In the Bible, it talks about rejoice when problems come your way, right? All the things that I went through, I am so thankful for because it made me a better person, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's, well, your past doesn't have to be a crutch, it could be a leverage. And I think as I look back at my past and all the things I went through, and sometimes people come up and say, "Oh, I feel so bad for you." I'm like, "Don't. I feel bad for you that you didn't go through any of this stuff because you don't truly appreciate things unless you go through extreme poverty, pain, suffering." And that's why I love the other channel, God's Voice Daily. People call me and they share their struggles, and I almost feel like I live their lives with them. And I feel like I have all these lives that I live with people because I listen to so many of them. But the most important thing, there's so many lessons that I take from their lives because you don't have to go through all that pain to learn the lesson. You can listen to a testimony and learn all the lessons you need to learn from just that one testimony if you listen well. Just like this testimony, right? All the things that were shared. Some people will just, information without application, just entertainment will just go by them. And others will truly receive this information, apply it in their lives. And speaking of all the lessons, for the last question, Kelly, you've been so generous. Thank you so much. Almost 2 hours in, you're still with me. I appreciate it. Let's end it on this. What's your biggest life lesson to date so far? Everything that you've learned, all the experience, everything you went through. If you had to leave us with one lesson, what would it be?
I would definitely say it's that no matter what, God is with you and that you aren't alone, that if you read the Bible, you can understand what he really means and wants for your life. Even if you don't have an experience like we had with God, that you can have kind of day-to-day interactions and feel he's there and participate and grow from that. And I really think that all these experiences that we all have are to help us grow and be more empathetic to other people and understand what they're going through, because every experience is different. So to your point that, watching these podcasts, reading books on trauma, spending time gaining knowledge that is about the human experience is something that comes with experience a lot of times, and that it actually you can use it, to your point, as a lever, and you can go past the trauma and have a really wonderful life. I guess the other thing is if you get into a box like I did when I was young, maybe reach out, maybe try to take the load off for a little while and, connect with others to try and avoid getting into that path. There's no you don't have to be at that dead ends by yourself. You can reach out, there's plenty of people to help you. So I think if someone can watch this and then say, "There is hope," it doesn't have to be that black, that maybe the things that I'm seeking are not things of God, and I recognize people use drugs and alcohol and things like that to numb the pain, but there are other ways that if they talk and connect with other individuals, organizations, churches, or read the Bible, that they can kinda work their way out of that with God over time.
Love all of that. Kelly, thank you so much. And you mentioned community. For everybody watching and listening, if you don't have a local church, you're somewhere far away in the middle of nowhere and you want to be connected with like-minded people, people like Kelly, you can join me at godsvoicefamily.com. Absolutely free. Every morning I lead a prayer call at 5:30 till 6 a.m. Sometimes it's more than that. And we have 20, 30 people hopping on FaceTime, talking to one another, fellowship and praying. And speaking of the community, one of them sent me this hoodie right here, his temple. He designed it. So we have a beautiful community. You guys join us. And Kelly, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your journey. I know it wasn't easy. I'm the first one to heard this whole story in full, and I'm honored that you trusted me with your story. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I really do hope this helps some other people and in whatever way, whether it's just, as I said, whether it's a religious way or a spiritual way, or that it helps them come out of a deep, dark place. And that's why I did it. I was like, I didn't want, I thought, because I had this testimony and I probably should document it for other people as much as I didn't wanna get up here and be on the internet. I think it's the best thing to do to help other people, and that's why I did it, and I appreciate that your forum is a place that is very accepting and open to hear everyone's ideas, that maybe everyone's a little different, but that we're all good and that we can learn from each other no matter where we are on this path. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Kelly, you did it with such excellence. I see you had notes and everything. So I appreciate you. We'll stay in touch. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you too.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Before you go, you don't want to miss our next guest. Bridget was an ER nurse who died 9 times and went to hell 3 times until Jesus brought her back with a message that will change how you see eternity forever. That video should be coming up on the screen right now. Go ahead and click on that video, and I'll see you there.